If you had 1 minute to live, what would you do? It's the kind of question you hear at parties or read in books, an interesting thought experiment to spark conversation, but never something you'd expect to confront in real life. It's a question that demands an answer, but also dances on the edges of your fears, brushing up against something so deeply unsettling that you'd rather push it away than face it. What if it wasn't just a question? What if it was a reality? The sun was setting over the flat, endless horizon of Texas, painting the sky in shades of pink, purple, and orange. I was driving down a two-lane road, the faint hum of tires on the pavement accompanying my thoughts. The air outside was heavy with the scent of dust and wildflowers. It was a peaceful drive, the kind of quiet that lets you think deeply, without interruption, about the small things in life, the things you tend to forget when you're caught up in the rush of the everyday world. My hands gripped the steering wheel, my heart beating in a steady rhythm. I was just trying to get home, just trying to make it back to the comfort of familiar faces, a hot meal, and the comforting routine of life. I had no idea how that routine would be shattered in the blink of an eye. One moment, I was drifting in and out of daydreams, the road stretching before me like an old friend. The next, I heard the screech of tires and felt the world turn upside down. It happened so fast, so suddenly that I didn't even have time to register it. 1 second, my car was rolling smoothly across the road, and the next, I was hurtling through the air. The impact was deafening. There was the sound of metal twisting, glass shattering, and a voice my own screaming in terror. My body was thrown violently against the seatbelt, and for a moment, everything stopped. I didn't know if I was alive or dead. It felt like I was caught in a dream, a nightmare that had no end. My heart was racing, my breath coming in shallow gasps. The world outside the car had become a blur of smoke and chaos. Then, there was silence. I'm not sure when it happened, but at some point, I realized I couldn't feel my body anymore. No pain, no weight, no sensation at all. It was as if I was floating. A strange, cool feeling washed over me. And that's when I saw it. I wasn't inside the car anymore. I was above it. Above the wreckage. I saw myself lying there, crumpled and still, blood pooling around me, the air thick with the smell of gasoline and burning rubber. But I wasn't scared. In fact, there was a strange sense of peace that filled me, as if I had been released from some invisible burden I hadn't even known I was carrying. It was as if a part of me, something deep and primal, knew that my time had come, that this was the end. But as I hovered there, above the scene of the accident, something inside me began to stir. Something I couldn't explain. A sense of urgency. A feeling that this wasn't the end after all. And that's when I saw it. The light. It wasn't like the light you see when you flip a switch in a dark room. No, this light was different. It was not just bright but alive, radiating warmth, beckoning me, pulling me toward it. It hovered in the distance, just beyond my reach, but somehow I knew that it was meant for me. That this was the moment of crossing over. The moment when life and death met. I was drawn to it as if by some invisible force. The light didn't blind me, but it filled me with a calm that I hadn't felt in years. My racing heart slowed, and my breathing became even. All of the chaos, all of the confusion, all of the pain seemed to fade away, leaving only the gentle pull of that light. I couldn't explain it, but in that moment I knew something that was both terrifying and comforting. I knew that what came next was inevitable, that my life was about to end. But I also knew this. I didn't have to go. Not yet, anyway. There was a voice, soft and distant, speaking to me. It wasn't a voice I could hear with my ears, but something I felt in the very core of my being. It wasn't demanding, nor was it insistent. It was simply there, offering a choice. You can stay, the voice whispered. Or you can go back. Stay, or go back. The words echoed in my mind, and for a moment, I didn't know how to respond. What was there to stay for? What was left for me in the world I'd just left behind? But the light called to me. It was a promise of something peaceful, something beyond the pain, beyond the suffering, beyond everything I had known. And yet, part of me hesitated. Part of me wasn't ready to let go. In that space, between life and death, I was suspended. For what felt like both a split second and an eternity, I weighed my options. And then, with an overwhelming sense of clarity, I knew what I had to do. I didn't choose the light. Not yet. Something inside me knew I wasn't done. I wasn't ready to leave just yet. The light dimmed, and the pull lessened. But there was still that voice, still that sense of peace, still that promise of something beyond. And then, in the blink of an eye, I was back. I don't remember what happened next. One moment, I was floating above the wreckage. The next, I was lying on the cold metal of the ambulance gurney, my chest heaving, my heart pounding in my ears. I was back, but I wasn't the same. My body hurt. It hurt in ways I hadn't imagined, every inch of me screaming as I tried to focus on the reality I had just returned to. But that wasn't what consumed me. What consumed me was the feeling deep inside, the certainty that I had seen something on the other side. Something that defied all logic, all reason. And now the question lingered, what was I supposed to do with this knowledge? What was I supposed to do with the truth that I had crossed the line between life and death and returned? The world I woke up to didn't seem real anymore. Everything felt foreign, disconnected. I was here, but I wasn't. I had seen beyond this world, and now nothing seemed to make sense. But as I lay there, struggling to breathe, struggling to hold on to the remnants of my own reality, one thing was clear. I had seen the light, and I had returned. But for how long? This is just the beginning of the story. The journey between life and death, between what is known and unknown, was only starting. And the truth that lay ahead, about what happens after we die, would soon change everything. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? It's strange, when you die and realize that you're not dead at all. The first thing I noticed when I left my body was the absolute stillness of everything. The chaos, the loud screeching of the tires, the crunch of metal, the glass shattering, all of it was gone. There was no pain, no discomfort, no overwhelming panic. There was just nothing. At first, I thought I was dreaming. A horrible, twisted dream brought on by the shock of the accident. But as I became more aware of my surroundings, I knew that wasn't the case. I wasn't in the car anymore. I wasn't even on the road. I was somewhere else. Above the wreckage. Floating. I couldn't explain it, but I was no longer tethered to my body. It was as if I was a separate entity, a mere observer of the scene below. I looked down and saw my broken body sprawled across the crumpled car, my chest still, my limbs twisted in ways that felt unnatural. I should have felt afraid. I should have panicked. But instead, all I felt was this strange, overwhelming sense of peace, like a heavy weight had been lifted off my chest. I wasn't worried about the blood or the twisted wreckage of the car or the fact that I had just crashed on a deserted Texas highway. I didn't feel the cold of the metal, the heat of the fire, or the suffocating air. There was only one thing, that peaceful absence of pain. I floated higher, slowly, effortlessly, as if the world below me was slipping farther and farther away. It wasn't an out-of-body experience in the traditional sense. It wasn't a sudden shock that yanked me out of my body like a burst of lightning. No, it was more like a gentle release, a quiet letting go of something I didn't even realize I had been holding on to. The more I ascended, the more I could see, the more I could sense. It wasn't just the wrecked car I was leaving behind. It was the world. Everything I had known, everything I had lived for, everything I had loved, it was all down there, shrinking away from me, until it became no more than a distant memory. I didn't understand what was happening, but I wasn't scared. There was a strange, tingling sensation running through me, like every fiber of my being was vibrating, coming to life in a way I had never known before. It was as if I was being stretched in every direction, and yet I wasn't breaking. I was whole, more whole than I had ever been. And then I saw it. In the distance, shimmering like a beacon through the darkness, was the light. It wasn't just a light in the physical sense. There was no source, no bulb to flicker, no fire to burn. It was just there, waiting for me. The light was all-encompassing, blindingly bright yet soft, soothing even. It wasn't like any light I had ever known, and as I moved closer, I could feel its warmth, wrapping me in its embrace like a mother wrapping her arms around a child. At first, it didn't make sense. I couldn't understand why this light was so important, so magnetic. But the longer I looked at it, the more I understood. It was the ultimate comfort. It was something pure, something that transcended all the noise and confusion of the life I had lived. For the briefest of moments, I wanted to rush toward it. I wanted to embrace it, to let it take me. To let it carry me far away from the pain and the fear, to let it take me into a place of eternal peace. And yet, something inside me hesitated. What would I leave behind? Who would I be without those I loved? The light was beckoning, but I wasn't sure I was ready. Something deep inside me fought against it, something primal and instinctive. Maybe it was fear, or maybe it was the remnants of life still holding on to me. Whatever it was, I felt torn. I couldn't explain why, but I knew that this was a choice, a decision I had to make. I could stay, or I could go back. But that wasn't the only thing that haunted me. As I floated closer to the light, I became aware of something else, something just as powerful as the light itself. A voice. A quiet, serene voice that didn't come from anywhere in particular, but seemed to emanate from the very essence of this place. It wasn't loud or forceful. It wasn't angry. It wasn't even trying to persuade me. It simply spoke, with a tone that was almost maternal, calm, and kind. "You can stay," it said. "Or you can go back." I couldn't see the source of the voice, but I felt it in every fiber of my being. It was familiar, like a memory I hadn't quite recalled yet. The voice wasn't pushing me, wasn't urging me in one direction or another. It was simply, there. Stay or go back. I drifted in the silence for what seemed like an eternity, my thoughts swirling around me. I couldn't explain why I hesitated. This should have been easy, shouldn't it? The light promised peace. The light promised release. But something inside me, something I didn't fully understand, told me that I wasn't done yet. There was something unfinished. Something I had left behind. I couldn't stay. Not yet. And so, slowly, gently, I pulled myself away from the light, stepping back into the shadows where the light seemed to fade. But even as I did, the voice lingered, soft and comforting, a reminder that I was not alone. That, no matter what I chose, I was safe. I was loved. It was the hardest thing I've ever done, to walk away from the light. To leave that peace behind, knowing it would be waiting for me when the time was right. But that time wasn't now. Not yet. The next thing I knew, I was back. It didn't happen with a jolt, like some people describe when they snap back into their bodies. No, it was more like a gradual shift, a gentle nudge. One moment I was there, suspended between life and death, and the next, I was here. I was back in the wrecked car. I could feel the cold air again, sharp against my skin. My chest was heaving. My heart was pounding in my ears. I felt everything, every ache, every bruise, every painful inch of my body. And yet, even with the pain, I couldn't help but feel different. The world felt strange now. Foreign. Like I had come back from somewhere I wasn't supposed to return from. I opened my eyes slowly, carefully, looking at the wreckage around me. I couldn't believe what had just happened. Had it really been real? Had I really left my body? Had I really seen that light? But before I could even make sense of it all, the sirens started. The rush of footsteps, the frantic voices, all of it was back. The world was back. And yet, I wasn't. As the paramedics began to work on me, trying to stabilize me, all I could think was this. I had crossed over. I had seen the other side. And now I had come back. But for how long? What did it all mean? And most of all, why had I returned? I didn't know yet. But I was about to find out. The first few hours after the accident were a blur. The ambulance ride, the bright lights of the hospital, the constant beeping of machines, all of it seemed so distant, so foreign. I was alive, yes, but my mind was still somewhere else, floating between two worlds, unsure of where I truly belonged. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had been to the other side, that the light wasn't just a figment of my imagination or some byproduct of a traumatized brain. It was real. I had seen it. I had felt it. But even as my body healed, my mind couldn't move past what had happened. The doctors and nurses were concerned about my physical state, broken ribs, a concussion, some bruises and cuts, but there was something deeper that troubled me. A heaviness I couldn't explain. The hardest part was trying to describe what I had experienced, trying to make sense of it. No one understood. I tried to explain it to my family, to my closest friends, but each time I spoke, the words felt hollow. They didn't have the weight I needed them to. I couldn't convey the enormity of what I had seen, what I had felt. I wanted to tell them about the light. How it had called to me, how it had enveloped me in a warmth I had never known. How I had been weightless, free from the burden of pain, floating above my broken body. But when I tried, the words seemed to slip through my fingers. I couldn't capture the experience in a way that made sense to them. It was as if they didn't hear me, or worse, didn't believe me. But it wasn't just about the light. It was the silence that followed it. The peace. The clarity. The moment I left my body, I was overcome by a deep sense of calm. It was like I had entered a place where everything was understood, where every question I had ever asked was suddenly irrelevant. There were no more fears, no more doubts. There was only a profound knowing, a certainty that I was part of something far greater than myself. That I was, in some strange and profound way, connected to the universe in a way I had never before understood. And then there was the voice. Not a voice in the traditional sense. Not a sound I could physically hear, but something far deeper. It was like a message transmitted directly to my soul, a language beyond words, beyond sounds. I can't fully explain it, but the voice didn't need to speak. It simply communicated. You can stay, or you can go back. It wasn't an order, and it wasn't a suggestion. It was an offer. A choice. The kind of choice that shakes you to your very core. After the accident, it was hard to put my life back together. The hospital visits. The physical therapy. The pain. I spent days recovering, trying to make sense of what had happened. But nothing felt the same. The world around me, with its noise and confusion, felt distant and irrelevant, as if I had been set adrift in a sea of sound, unable to grasp onto anything solid. But it was when I started to sleep that I found the real change. I began to dream. But these dreams weren't like the ones I had before. They were vivid, real, almost like I was living in another world altogether. Each dream felt like a continuation of the journey I had started, a journey between life and death. I would drift off to sleep, and suddenly I was back in the space between. Floating, weightless, and once again, I could feel the pull of that light. In these dreams, the voice was always there. Gentle, but clear. You can stay, or you can go back. And every time, I would wake up. But each time I woke, it was harder to shake the feeling that I had chosen wrong. That there was something I had left behind, something I was meant to understand. In those moments, I began to sense a deeper truth. I wasn't just hearing the voice. I wasn't just seeing the light. I was part of it. I was part of something greater than life and death. Something that transcended everything I had ever known. It was as if, in that brief moment between life and death, my soul had been awakened. I had glimpsed the very essence of existence itself, the truth that, deep down, we are all connected. That our lives are not just a series of isolated events, but part of a greater, eternal flow. And that, in some strange way, we are always part of the light. But back in the waking world, the words escaped me. I couldn't make anyone understand what had happened to me. I couldn't convey the depth of the experience, the clarity of the truth I had felt. The hardest part was the loneliness. Not physical loneliness, but emotional. the sense that no one else truly knew what I had seen. No one else could understand the depth of my experience. And the more I tried to explain it, the more isolated I felt. It was as though the world around me was moving on, continuing as if nothing had changed, but I was different. I wasn't the same person who had walked into that accident. I had seen something profound, and now I couldn't find the words to share it. My family, my friends, they were concerned for me, of course. They tried to comfort me, tried to tell me everything would be okay, but no one could see the change inside me. They didn't know what it was like to look into the light, to feel that deep, universal connection, to hear the voice that spoke to my soul. And as much as I wanted to move on, as much as I wanted to go back to the way things were, I couldn't. I had seen the other side, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. I remember one afternoon, weeks after the accident, when I was sitting alone in my living room. The world outside was bathed in sunlight, the quiet hum of suburban life continuing on as if nothing had happened. But inside, I was restless, caught between two realities. And that's when I felt it again. A tug. A pull. The same one I had felt when I was floating above the wreckage, when I had first encountered the light. The voice was there again. Not in words, but in the same deep, undeniable knowing. You can stay, or you can go back. It was then that I realized something profound. I hadn't just been given a choice that day on the highway. I hadn't just been offered an escape from life. I had been shown a glimpse of something far greater than I could have ever imagined. And now it was my decision, my choice, whether to live my life as I had before or to embrace the truth I had learned. Because the truth was this: life and death aren't opposites. They are one and the same, connected, interwoven. And we are part of it all. I wasn't sure how to live with this new understanding. But one thing was certain: I would never be the same again. I was back. At least, physically, I was. But nothing felt the same. The hardest part about returning from the other side wasn't the physical pain, though that was certainly present. It was the internal struggle, the feeling that I didn't belong in my own life anymore. In the days that followed, my body slowly healed. The broken ribs knitted together, the bruises faded, and the cuts on my skin began to scab over. But as I looked at myself in the mirror, I didn't recognize the person staring back. The face was mine, but the eyes, they were different. I had always been someone who valued logic, who dismissed anything that couldn't be proven. Life had been about work, family, and staying in control. But now, after the accident, the world didn't fit into neat little boxes. It was messy, chaotic, and somehow infinitely more beautiful. But it was also confusing. I wanted to forget. I wanted to bury the memory of the light, the voice, the overwhelming peace that had enveloped me. I wanted to return to the comfort of my old life, to the familiar rhythms of work and routine. But every time I closed my eyes, the light returned, softly pulsing, always there, calling to me. I tried to talk to my husband, Jack, about it. He was a practical man, always grounded in the physical world. He listened, but I could see the skepticism in his eyes. He didn't understand. How could he? How are you feeling today? He would ask, as if it were a simple question. As if I could answer it simply. But there was no simple answer. I'm fine, I would lie, though the words felt hollow in my throat. I'm just tired. But I wasn't fine. I wasn't tired. I was changed. The hardest part was knowing that no one else could truly understand. The doctors and nurses had done their job, fixed my body, patched me up. But they didn't see the light. They didn't feel the peace. They didn't hear the voice. Jack tried to be supportive, but every time I spoke of my experience, he became distant. He'd change the subject or give me that look, the one that said, "You're not making sense." I couldn't blame him. No one in my life had ever experienced anything like I had. How could they understand? They hadn't crossed over. They hadn't felt the pull of the other side, the undeniable certainty that there was something more to this life. That's why it was so hard to explain. How do you describe something so profound, something that defies every rule you've ever known? In the midst of this confusion, I found myself retreating. I spent hours alone in my room, pacing the floor, trying to understand what had happened to me. What did it all mean? Why had I come back? One night, as I sat in the dark, the voice returned. It wasn't a spoken word. It wasn't a sound I could hear. It was more like a presence, something deeply intuitive, resonating inside me. "Don't be afraid," it said. "You are not alone." The words were simple, but they carried a weight that no human voice could ever replicate. They weren't a comfort in the traditional sense. They weren't meant to soothe me. They were meant to remind me of something larger, something beyond my own fears. I had a choice to make. The moment I had crossed over, the moment I had left my body and floated toward the light, I had been given a choice. Stay or return. I had chosen to return. And now, in the silence of the night, I began to realize why. I wasn't done. There was still something I needed to do. Something unfinished. But what? What was I supposed to do with this knowledge, with this transformation? I felt like a stranger in my own life, trying to navigate a world that felt somehow distant, disconnected from the truth I had glimpsed. The next day, I took a walk. It was one of those crisp autumn afternoons where the sun hangs low in the sky, casting everything in soft, golden light. I walked slowly, my mind still reeling from the conversation I'd had with the voice the night before. As I walked through the neighborhood, I saw people, neighbors out walking their dogs, children playing in the yards, the world going on as it always had. But to me, it felt like I was looking at a painting, not living in the moment. Everything was beautiful, yes, but also fleeting, fragile, and distant. I stopped by the park where I used to bring my kids when they were little. It was quiet now, only a few joggers and a couple of people sitting on the benches. The trees were just beginning to change color, the leaves turning vibrant shades of orange and red. I took a seat on a bench and closed my eyes, trying to center myself. It was there, in the quiet of that moment, that I realized something. The voice hadn't been a simple offer, it was an invitation. An invitation to something bigger. The choice wasn't just about life or death. It was about purpose. It was about realizing that life itself was the journey, not the destination. The light, the peace, the calm, it wasn't the end. It was just a part of something ongoing, something eternal. And now, in this life, I had a responsibility to live in a way that honored that truth. I had to live with intention, with awareness, with the understanding that life wasn't just about surviving, it was about experiencing, about connecting, about being present. I had been given a second chance and I would not squander it. But what did that look like? How could I possibly live up to the magnitude of what I had seen? How could I bring that truth into my everyday life, where everything felt so mundane and disconnected? I didn't have all the answers yet. I didn't know exactly what my path was supposed to be. But I knew one thing. I wasn't the same person I had been before the accident. I had crossed over. I had seen the other side. And I had returned with a purpose. It wasn't easy, of course. It never is. I still struggled with the doubt and fear that crept in every time I tried to talk to someone about what had happened. I still felt out of place, disconnected from the world I had once known. But each day, I tried to live in the way the voice had shown me. Each day, I tried to live with intention, to see the beauty in the small things, to embrace the connections I had with those around me. And little by little, I began to understand. I was still me, but I was more. More connected to the world, more attuned to the deeper rhythms of life, more aware of the light that I had once seen and that was still there, waiting for me when the time was right. But for now, I was here, and I had a life to live. Life after the accident wasn't the same. I kept trying to force it back into familiar patterns, but every step felt like I was trying to squeeze myself into a pair of shoes that no longer fit. The world seemed a little smaller now, somehow, as though I had stepped out of the routine of ordinary life and onto a different path, one that led to questions that were impossible to answer. The hardest part, though, wasn't the physical healing. It was the emotional distance that had crept into my relationships. I loved my family deeply, Jack, the kids, my parents, but I couldn't help feeling like I was from a different world. They didn't see things the way I did anymore. They hadn't seen the light. They hadn't felt the peace. They didn't know that I had crossed over, seen beyond the veil of this life, and come back. And the more I tried to tell them, the more I realized they couldn't comprehend it. It wasn't their fault. How could they? They hadn't been where I had been. I found myself withdrawing, spending more and more time alone, trying to understand what was happening inside me. One evening, Jack and I sat at the dinner table in silence. The kids were at their grandparents' house, and for once, the house felt still. Too still. "How are you really feeling, Alice?" Jack's voice broke the silence, but there was a tension behind his words. It wasn't the casual inquiry of someone asking about the day. It was different, deeper. Almost like he was asking for something he couldn't put into words. I paused, unsure of how to answer. Could I explain what I was feeling? Could I even put it into words? I had tried before, but every time, the words came out wrong. There was no way to truly convey the depth of what had happened to me. The light, the voice, the overwhelming sense of peace and love. The certainty that life and death were not opposites, but part of the same continuum. "I'm fine," I finally said, my voice hollow. "Just trying to make sense of everything." Jack nodded, though I could see that he didn't fully understand. He wanted to, but how could he? He hadn't been there. "I just want things to go back to normal," he said quietly, pushing his food around on his plate. "I miss the way things were before all of this. Before the accident." "I know," I replied softly, my heart heavy with the truth I couldn't speak. "I miss that, too. I miss the way life used to feel familiar, safe. But I couldn't pretend anymore. Everything had changed. And there was no going back." The next few days were a blur of mundane tasks. Doctor appointments, phone calls, the daily grind of trying to keep things together. I felt like I was living two lives at once, one in this physical world and another in the quiet spaces of my mind where the light still lingered. It wasn't just the physical recovery that kept me anchored here. It was the nagging sense that there was something else I was meant to do, something deeper that needed to be explored. I wasn't just meant to return to my old life. No, I had been given a glimpse of something much larger, and now I had to find a way to integrate it into my life. One afternoon, as I sat in my favorite chair by the window, the voice came again. Soft, but unmistakable. "You are not alone." I took a deep breath, the words washing over me like a wave. There was no physical voice, no audible sound, but the message was clear. The voice didn't need to speak to me in words. It spoke directly to my soul. In that moment, I understood something. I wasn't just here to live my life for myself. I was here to connect, to others, to the world, to the unseen forces that bind us all together. I had been given the chance to witness something beyond this reality, and it was my responsibility to share that, to live in a way that honored the deeper truths I had learned. But how? How could I share what I knew when the world around me seemed so disconnected, so wrapped up in the trivialities of day-to-day life? That's when I began to see it. These connections, invisible but undeniable, were everywhere. They were in the way a stranger smiled at me as we passed on the street. They were in the way a child laughed, their joy spilling out like light. They were in the way the trees swayed in the wind, the quiet hum of nature that seemed to vibrate in tune with something much larger than our human experience. I had been shown this interconnectedness. The light had revealed it to me, and now it was my turn to live by it. To not just go through the motions, but to truly see the world. To see the people around me as not separate, but as part of the same vast, flowing current of existence. I knew now that I wasn't meant to change the world in any grand way. I wasn't meant to perform miracles or preach, but I was meant to live with awareness. To live with love and connection. To treat every interaction, no matter how small, with the reverence it deserved. And so I began. Each day, I started to notice the little things, the way the light filtered through the window in the morning, The way the birds seemed to sing just a little louder after a rainstorm. The way people smiled at one another, even if they didn't know each other. The quiet hum of life, vibrating all around me, reminding me that I wasn't just living in this world, I was a part of it. And so were all of us. Jack noticed the change in me. I could see it in his eyes, the way he would watch me a little longer, as if trying to figure out who I had become. It wasn't an easy change. There were moments when I could feel the gap between us, the unspoken questions hanging in the air. One night, after the kids had gone to bed, Jack turned to me. "Are you okay, Alice?" he asked, his voice gentle but full of concern. I nodded, but then I said something I hadn't allowed myself to say before. "I'm different now, and I'm not sure you'll understand. But I'm trying to figure out what that means. I don't want to go back to the way things were." "I can't." Jack didn't say anything for a long time. Then, quietly, he replied, "I don't understand it, Alice. But I'm here. I'm willing to try. I just need you to let me in." His words felt like a lifeline, a way to bridge the gap that had formed between us. I didn't know how to explain everything I had experienced, but I knew this. I wasn't alone. Not really. We were all connected in ways I couldn't fully explain, but I could feel it. And maybe, just maybe, I could help him feel it too. And so, I began to live differently. With more intention. More connection. I reached out to friends I hadn't spoken to in years, making an effort to listen more deeply, to see them not as isolated individuals, but as part of the greater whole. I embraced the small moments, those seemingly insignificant interactions that we often overlook. I started to understand that each person I met was a reflection of something bigger than myself. And I wanted to honor that, to see it for what it truly was. Jack and I began to talk more, really talk. And slowly, the space between us began to close. The light I had seen in my near-death experience, it wasn't just for me. It was for all of us. I had been shown that, and now I had to live it. The journey wasn't over. I had many questions left, and there were still days when the weight of it all felt overwhelming. But now I knew I wasn't alone. Not in the way I had once thought. I was part of something greater. And so was everyone else. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The days grew longer as I continued to navigate my new reality. There were moments of profound clarity, where the truth I had glimpsed on the other side seemed to shine brighter, and then there were moments of doubt. Sometimes the old habits crept in, those old fears, the insecurities, the feeling that maybe I was losing my grip on the life I had once known. But I refused to let go of the truth I had been shown. I had seen the light, and I knew it was still with me, even in the darkest moments. It was during one of those quiet, introspective moments that I realized something I had missed during the chaos of my recovery. I wasn't just meant to live differently for myself. I was meant to help others see what I had seen. The connections, the love, the truth that binds us all together. That realization came slowly, like a seed planted in the back of my mind, growing little by little until I could no longer ignore it. I had been shown that we were all connected, not just in the physical world, but on a much deeper level. There was a vast web of energy, of love, of light, that connected every living being. And I was part of that web. We all were. But there was more. I had been given the gift of understanding that healing didn't just happen in the body. It wasn't enough to fix the broken bones or mend the cuts. The real healing, the kind that lasted, happened when we connected to the deeper parts of ourselves and to each other. I began to focus on this. Not just on myself, but on those around me. I wanted to bring them into this new reality I had found, to help them understand what I had seen. I wasn't sure how to do that, but I knew I had to try. One afternoon, I visited my sister, Kate. She had always been a spiritual person, someone who believed in energy and intuition, though we had never discussed the deeper mysteries of life, at least, not in any meaningful way. Our conversations had always been lighthearted, catching up on family matters, but there was something in me now that longed to connect with her on a different level. As I sat down in her living room, the familiar warmth of her house enveloping me, I knew that I had to take a chance. I had to share what I had experienced. "I've been thinking a lot," I began, my voice tentative, "about life and death and everything in between." Kate looked at me, her brows furrowing slightly. "What do you mean? Are you okay?" "I'm more than okay," I replied, my voice steady now, though my heart was beating a little faster. "I've learned something. Something big. Something that I don't think I can fully explain, but I need you to understand." Kate was quiet for a moment, watching me closely. I could see the concern in her eyes, but there was also a spark of curiosity. "Okay," she said softly. "I'm listening." And so I told her. I told her everything, the light, the peace, the love that had flooded me when I crossed over. I told her about the voice that had spoken to me, about the message I had received. We are all connected. Life and death are part of the same cycle. And the most important thing we can do is love one another and live with intention. When I finished, there was a long silence. Kate didn't speak for what felt like an eternity. She simply sat there, absorbing what I had said. "You really believe all of this, don't you?" she asked softly. I nodded. "I know it sounds crazy, but I've felt it. I've experienced it. I'm not the same person I was before." She studied me for a moment longer, then smiled gently. "I don't think you're crazy, Alice. You sound different, but in a good way. Maybe it's time we all started looking at things a little differently." Her words hit me in a way I wasn't expecting. She wasn't rejecting me. She wasn't laughing at me. She was acknowledging the shift I had gone through and accepting it. And in that moment, I realized that healing wasn't just about accepting what had happened to me. It was about creating space for others to heal as well. It was about bringing them into the light I had found. Over the next few weeks, I began to reach out more, to family, to friends, to anyone I could. I spoke openly about what I had experienced, trying to convey the peace I had felt, the understanding I had gained. At first, it was difficult. Some people didn't understand, and I could see the doubt in their eyes. But I also saw something else, a flicker of curiosity, a spark of recognition. They didn't understand fully, but something inside them was being stirred. And in those moments, I knew I was doing the right thing. I wasn't pushing anyone. I wasn't trying to convince them. I was simply sharing my experience and letting them decide for themselves. It was with Jack, though, that the real breakthrough came. He had been distant for so long, unsure of what to make of the changes in me. But one night, after a particularly long conversation about life and what it all meant, he looked at me and said something that changed everything. "I don't understand it, Alice. But I want to try. I want to understand. I can't promise I'll get there, but I'm willing to walk this path with you." Tears welled in my eyes. I had been waiting for this moment, hoping for it, and here it was. Jack wasn't dismissing me anymore. He was opening his heart, allowing himself to step into the unknown with me. It wasn't an easy journey for either of us. There were moments of tension, moments when Jack struggled to believe in what I had experienced. But there were also moments of connection, when the love between us deepened, when we held each other close and knew that we were walking this path together, no matter where it led. The more I shared, the more I realized that healing is not a solitary process. We don't heal alone. We heal in connection, through our relationships, through our love, through our ability to open ourselves to one another. It was as if I had been shown the truth, not just for myself, but for everyone. We are all part of something greater than ourselves. And when we connect with one another, when we truly see one another, we create a space where healing can happen. It wasn't just a matter of accepting what had happened to me. It was about accepting that we are all part of this grand, interconnected web of existence. And when we recognize that, when we honor the connections that bind us, we become part of the healing process for each other. I had been given a second chance, a new perspective on life, and now I was sharing it with the world. And in doing so, I was healing not just myself, but everyone I touched. The passage of time, they say, heals all wounds. But there are some scars that don't fade. Some moments, no matter how far back they lie, leave imprints on the heart that never truly vanish. And even though I had come back from the other side with an understanding that life and death were part of the same flow, there was still something I had to face, something darker than the light that had embraced me. It was the weight of what I had left behind, the memories that clung to me like shadows in the corners of my mind. That was something I hadn't been prepared for. The light I had seen, the overwhelming sense of peace and love, was undeniably beautiful. But no one had told me about the shadows. The memories of the accident haunted me, despite my efforts to move forward. They didn't come in waves, as they did for some. Instead, they lurked in the background of my daily life, manifesting as fragments, flashes of headlights, the screech of tires, the gut-wrenching silence after the impact. I could still see the way everything seemed to slow down in that split second, before everything went dark, the way time itself had stretched, like a rubber band about to snap. But those memories weren't the only shadows. The real struggle came from what I hadn't been able to face before, the grief. The grief I had buried deep down, thinking that perhaps it wasn't as important as the miracle I had been given, the second chance at life. How could I feel grief when I had been shown the way to something greater? How could I mourn when I had witnessed the peace that awaits us all on the other side? It didn't make sense. But the heart doesn't always follow logic. And in the quiet hours of the night, I found myself yearning for the life I had once known, the life that had seemed so certain, so predictable. The life before the accident. The life before the light. It was Jack who first noticed the weight in my eyes. It had been months since I had come back, and although I was making progress, physically, emotionally, he could see something was missing. The old spark that had once danced in my eyes seemed dimmer now, buried beneath a quiet sadness. "You're not here, Alice," he said one evening, his voice full of concern. "I can see it. You're somewhere else. Somewhere I can't reach." I didn't know how to answer him, how to explain that the world I had seen on the other side was still with me, but it felt like a distant memory, a beautiful dream that was slipping through my fingers. It was as if I had touched eternity for just a brief moment and then had been thrust back into this fractured world where everything seemed so much more fragile, so much more temporary. "I'm here," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "But it feels like a part of me didn't come back. Like a part of me is still somewhere else." Jack sat down beside me, his hand reaching out to touch mine. "What do you mean?" "You came back, Alice. You're here with me. We've been getting through this together." I shook my head, my heart heavy with the weight of things I couldn't fully articulate. "You don't understand, Jack. I know I'm here. I know I'm alive. But sometimes it feels like I'm living in a dream. Like I'm watching everything happen from a distance, but I can't really touch it." His gaze softened, and he squeezed my hand. "I can't pretend to understand what you went through. But I'm here, Alice. I'll be here for you. And I won't let you go through this alone." His words, though comforting, only made me feel more isolated. He meant well, but how could he understand? How could he understand what it felt like to step into another world and then be pulled back, to be thrust into this world of pain and impermanence? It wasn't that I didn't love him or the kids. I did, with all my heart. But the truth was, I felt like a stranger in my own life. A ghost, drifting between two worlds. It was then that I started to understand the real nature of healing. Healing wasn't just about moving forward or pushing past the difficult memories. It wasn't about simply replacing grief with joy or darkness with light. No, healing was about integrating the shadows, about acknowledging that both light and darkness coexist in our lives, that the two are not opposites, but part of the same whole. The shadows were part of me now. They weren't something I could outrun or ignore. They were memories, emotions, experiences that had shaped me into the person I had become. And instead of trying to banish them, I needed to embrace them. I needed to allow them space in my heart. I began journaling again, not with the intention of creating a polished narrative, but simply to allow the thoughts and emotions to pour out. I wrote about the accident, the pain, the fear, and the guilt that still clung to me. I wrote about my family, about the guilt I felt for leaving them behind, even for just a brief moment, and the sadness that came with knowing I couldn't truly explain what I had seen. I wrote about my grief, and for the first time in months, I allowed myself to cry. I cried for the person I had been, for the person I had lost, for the life that was no longer mine. And in those tears, I began to feel something new, something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. As the weeks passed, I slowly began to make peace with my grief. It wasn't something I could just shake off, and it certainly wasn't something I could forget. But it was a part of my healing, a part of my journey. I started to notice more of the little things, the way the sun filtered through the leaves of the trees, the sound of birds singing in the morning, the feel of Jack's hand in mine. These were the things that connected me to this world. The things that reminded me that even in the shadows, there was still light. And one day, as I sat in the backyard, my journal resting in my lap, I realized something. The shadows weren't there to hold me back. They were there to remind me of what I had survived, to remind me of the strength I had within me. The shadows, I realized, were not the enemy. They were part of the tapestry of life, woven together with the light. And by embracing them, by acknowledging their presence in my life, I was finally free to move forward. Jack came outside to join me, sitting beside me without a word. We sat in silence, watching the evening sky turn from soft gold to deep blue. The air was still, peaceful. It was as if the world itself was holding its breath, allowing me this moment of peace. "I'm okay," I said finally, my voice steady. "I'm learning to live with it all." Jack looked at me, his face soft with understanding. "You don't have to have all the answers, Alice. You don't have to fix everything. Just be here. With me. With us." And for the first time since I had returned, I felt it. The connection. The love. The peace that had eluded me for so long. I didn't have all the answers. But I didn't need to. The light, the love, the healing, they were already within me. I just had to allow myself to feel it, to embrace it, and to share it with those I loved. The shadows would always be a part of my journey. But now, I could see them for what they truly were. A reminder of the strength I carried within me, the depth of my experience, and the fullness of my life. Both light and shadow together, they created the whole. The days after my breakthrough with the shadows were a delicate dance. A subtle reminder that healing is not linear, and sometimes, the healing comes not from our own strength, but from the collective power of those we let into our hearts. There were still moments where the memories of the accident would surge back with such force. It felt as though I was right back there, frozen in that moment of impact. But I knew now that those moments didn't define me. I was more than what had happened to me. I was more than the trauma, more than the survivor. I was alive, and I had been gifted a life to live in full. The real change came when I began to share my journey, my story, with those around me. At first, I was hesitant. It felt vulnerable, exposing parts of myself that I wasn't sure I was ready to share. But I had come to realize something profound during those months of isolation. I wasn't the only one carrying shadows. I wasn't the only one who had been touched by darkness, by loss, or by fear. In fact, everyone I knew carried some burden. Whether it was grief, regret, or unspoken pain, each person was walking around with their own set of invisible scars. And so, I began speaking. I started small, sharing my experiences with close friends, people who I knew would listen without judgment. There was something incredibly freeing in letting the words tumble out, not as a confession or a plea for sympathy, but as an offering. I wasn't asking for anything. I was simply sharing what I had learned, hoping that it would help someone else along their journey. It was a Sunday afternoon when I first opened up to the church group. I had been attending services with Jack and the kids for months, sitting quietly in the back, feeling disconnected from the sermon. Not because the message wasn't meaningful, but because I was still caught between two worlds, the one I had left behind and the one I was now trying to rejoin. The pastor, a kind woman with a gentle spirit, had asked the group to share any personal experiences they felt led to talk about. I felt my heart quicken. My mouth went dry. I hadn't planned to speak, but somehow the words found their way to the surface, pushing their way out before I could stop them. I'd like to share something, I said, my voice trembling slightly. I could feel every set of eyes turning toward me, and for a moment, I wanted to run. But the truth had already found its way to the edge of my lips. I don't know why I'm saying this, but I feel like I need to. I paused, searching for the right words. I've been through something. I mean, something that, well, it changed everything for me. I died. For a brief moment, I was gone. But I came back, and what I saw, what I felt, has been with me ever since. And I think I'm meant to share it with you. The room fell silent, the only sound being the soft hum of the air conditioning. I could see the skepticism in some faces, the curiosity in others, but I pushed through. I spoke of the light, of the love, of the peace that had enveloped me when I left my body, and of the deep understanding I had gained about life, death, and our place in this vast universe. It wasn't easy, but as I spoke, I saw tears begin to form in the eyes of those around me. Some people nodded as if they were beginning to understand something they had never considered before. I didn't know if my words were reaching them, but I hoped they were. When I finished, the room was still. There were no dramatic reactions, no applause, no instant catharsis. But I saw something in their eyes, something that had been missing before. There was a connection. A shared understanding that went beyond words. It wasn't about my story anymore. It was about all of us together, seeking the same truth. The pastor smiled warmly at me, her eyes glistening. "Thank you, Alice," she said softly. "That was beautiful. You've shared something that so many of us need to hear. We are not alone in this journey." And in that moment, I realized something I hadn't fully understood before. When we share our pain, our truth, our experience, we create ripples. Small, seemingly insignificant ripples at first, but eventually, those ripples spread out, touching lives in ways we can't always see. The act of sharing, the vulnerability of it, creates space for others to heal, too. The following weeks were a blur of personal growth and connection. I continued to open up, not just in church, but in every aspect of my life. I shared my experiences with my family, with old friends, even with strangers who had suffered loss. There was something healing about not carrying this burden alone. There was something freeing about allowing others to see the whole picture of me, the broken pieces, the light, the darkness, and the strength that came from both. And the more I shared, the more I realized something. When we are honest about our struggles, when we allow others to witness our vulnerability, we invite them to do the same. We give them permission to share their own pain, their own healing journey. And in that shared space, true healing happens. I began to see the ripple effect of my own story. A neighbor who had lost her daughter years ago reached out to me, telling me that hearing my experience gave her a sense of peace she hadn't felt in a long time. A coworker, someone I had known for years but never truly connected with, confided in me about the grief she had been carrying since the death of her husband. And as I listened to her story, I could feel the healing taking place, not just in her, but in me, too. The more I gave, the more I received. It was as if every time I shared a piece of my heart, I created a space for others to do the same. And in that shared space, I could feel the light growing, expanding, until it was no longer something I carried alone, but something we all shared. Jack and I sat together one evening after the kids had gone to bed. We were quiet for a long time, each lost in our own thoughts. Finally, he spoke, his voice low. "You've changed, Alice," he said, his tone soft but filled with awe. "You've really changed. I don't know how to explain it, but you're different. And I'm proud of you. Proud of how far you've come." I smiled at him, grateful for his unwavering support, even when he didn't fully understand what I had gone through. "I'm not sure I've changed, Jack," I replied softly. "I think I'm just starting to become who I was always meant to be." And in that moment, I realized that the journey I had been on, this path of healing and growth, wasn't just about me. It wasn't about one person. It was about all of us, walking this road together, connected by the stories we share, the love we give, and the light we carry. The more we gave to each other, the more the world around us began to heal. The ripple effect wasn't just my story. It was our collective story. And every time I spoke, every time I listened, every time I opened myself up, the ripples spread a little further. And I knew that no matter what happened from here on out, I would continue to share my light, and in doing so, I would help create a space for others to do the same. Because in the end, that was the message I had been given: we are all connected. And in that connection, there is healing. It's strange how the universe works. There are moments when you feel like you understand everything. The fog lifts, and for a brief, dazzling moment, it feels like everything clicks into place. You think, "I've got this. I know my purpose. I know where I'm headed." And then, just as suddenly, the world tilts again. The ground shifts beneath your feet. You stumble. The certainty you once had dissipates like smoke. The clarity you had becomes fog once more. That's what happened to me. Just when I thought I had finally begun to make peace with my journey, with the light and the shadows, I was confronted with something I wasn't ready for. Something that shook me to my core: the unknown. I had always thought of death as something final, something that would come to an end and leave us in peace. But as I began to embrace my own experience and share it with others, I realized something terrifying. Even though I had seen the other side, even though I had witnessed the love, the light, and the overwhelming peace, I still didn't know what it all meant. I had seen the afterlife, but not the whole of it. There was still so much I didn't understand, so much I couldn't explain. I felt like I had touched the surface of something vast and mysterious, but I was still standing at the edge of an infinite sea. The more I shared my story, the more questions I had. The more people I spoke to, the more layers of uncertainty seemed to unfold. It wasn't a fear of death, not exactly. No, it was the fear of the unknown. The parts of life and death that no one could truly explain, the areas where the light of understanding didn't quite reach. What if there was more to it all than I had experienced? What if there were things waiting for us that were beyond comprehension? Things that I couldn't prepare for, no matter how much I tried to understand the mystery of it all. It was one evening, while I was sitting by the window, watching the world go dark outside, that I felt the weight of this uncertainty more than ever. Jack was in the kitchen, finishing up dinner, and the kids were upstairs doing homework, the house filled with the usual hum of everyday life. It was peaceful, a comfort I had come to treasure, but there was something gnawing at me, a question I couldn't shake. What happens after we die? I had seen the light, the warmth, the profound peace, but that didn't answer everything. I didn't know what happened after that moment. I didn't know what awaited us beyond what I had experienced. And as I sat there, staring into the darkness, I realized how little I truly understood. I could only speak of what I had felt and seen, but I couldn't give anyone concrete answers. I wanted to know. I wanted to understand the grand design. But the truth was, I wasn't sure if we were meant to understand it all. Some mysteries, I thought, were meant to remain unsolved. Jack came into the room and sat down beside me, his presence a comforting warmth in the otherwise cold space. "You've been quiet tonight," he said, his voice gentle as he nudged me with his shoulder. "What's on your mind?" I hesitated, unsure how to voice what I had been feeling. It wasn't easy to explain this sensation of restlessness, the sense of being both here and there at once. My mind had been churning with questions, each one more disorienting than the last. I've been thinking, I began slowly, about everything, about life, about what happens after, about death. I thought I understood it. I thought I had it all figured out. But now, I don't know. He was quiet for a moment, then turned to face me fully, his eyes soft with understanding. You're allowed to have questions, Alice. That's part of this whole journey. The uncertainty, the not knowing, it's all a part of being human. I looked at him, my heart filled with both gratitude and fear. But I've seen it. I've been there. I felt the peace. But there's still so much I don't know. I can't explain it. I thought if I just knew enough, I could be at peace with it. But maybe there's just too much we're not meant to understand. Jack reached out and gently cupped my face in his hands, his touch grounding me. Maybe the point isn't to understand it all, he said, his voice steady and reassuring. Maybe it's not about the answers. Maybe it's about the trust. The trust that there's something greater than we can comprehend. And it's okay not to have all the answers. I closed my eyes, taking in his words. It was the first time I had heard someone put it that way. Perhaps that was the lesson I needed to learn, not to have all the answers, but to trust in the mystery. To surrender to the unknown, even when it felt uncomfortable, even when it left me vulnerable. And so, in that quiet moment, I chose to let go. I chose to surrender to the unknown. It wasn't easy. It felt as though I was standing on the edge of a great abyss, looking into the vastness, uncertain of what lay beyond. But something shifted in me as I sat with the uncertainty. I realized that I didn't need to understand everything. I didn't need to control what was beyond my grasp. Maybe the beauty of life and of death was in its mystery, in the not knowing. The light I had seen, the peace I had felt, would remain with me. And I didn't have to fully understand it to carry it with me. The answers might never come, but the love, the peace, and the light I had experienced, those were real. They were enough. It wasn't a grand revelation, not in the way I had imagined. There were no sudden fireworks of clarity. Instead, it was a quiet, humbling acceptance. The surrender wasn't a dramatic shift. It was a slow, gentle release. Like the ebb of the tide pulling away from the shore, taking with it all the worry, all the need for control. In the days that followed, I found myself walking through the world with a little more ease. I wasn't looking for answers anymore, and that made all the difference. I had stopped grasping, stopped forcing everything to fit into a neat little box. Instead, I began to simply live. To be. Jack noticed the change in me before I did. You seem lighter, he said one evening as we sat together on the porch, watching the sunset. Like something's lifted. I smiled, the warmth of the moment soaking into my bones. Maybe it has, I said softly. Maybe I'm just finally starting to let go of the need to know everything. And in that letting go, I found peace. Not because I had all the answers, but because I had made peace with the questions. With the uncertainty. With the unknown. The light I had seen on the other side was still there, still guiding me. And now, instead of grasping for certainty, I could simply walk in its glow, trusting that the journey, no matter how uncertain, was the answer in itself. As the days turned into weeks, I found myself moving through the world with a new sense of connection. It was subtle at first, almost imperceptible. But if I was honest with myself, I had been craving this for a long time. To feel like I truly belonged, like I was part of something larger, something that transcended my own individual experiences. When I had first returned from the other side, I had felt so alone. The light, the peace, the love that I had encountered felt so vast, so infinite, but it had also felt like something that was mine alone. For a long time, I didn't know how to share it. I didn't know how to connect with anyone in a way that honored what I had experienced, what I had learned. It was as if I had touched the divine, and yet the world around me was still so tethered to the ordinary. But the more I shared my story, the more I realized that the light wasn't just my light. It was all of our light. The peace I had felt wasn't confined to the realm I had visited. It was available to everyone. I didn't need to grasp for it anymore. I could simply be a conduit for it. The more I let go of my need to understand and control, the more I began to sense the deep interconnectedness of everything. The more I realized that my experience, my healing, wasn't just for me. It was for everyone. It was at a small gathering of friends, old and new, that the sense of connection became undeniable. We were sitting in a circle in the backyard, the sound of laughter and conversation blending with the gentle rustling of leaves in the breeze. The night was warm, the sky a deep shade of blue, scattered with stars. Jack and I had hosted a dinner party, inviting a few people from our church, our neighborhood, and even a few colleagues who had become friends over the months. It was a moment of joy, a celebration of life, of the connections we had made in the wake of my near-death experience. As we passed around plates of food and glasses of wine, the conversation shifted to something deeper. We were talking about our shared struggles, our losses, our fears, and our triumphs. There was no agenda, no lecture, just a simple sharing of stories. It was Mary, a woman I had met a few months ago at church, who spoke up first. She had lost her husband to cancer 2 years prior, and the grief still hung heavily on her, even though she had tried to move forward. As she spoke, I could see the sorrow in her eyes, the quiet weight of the past still burdening her. "I don't know how to keep going," she said softly, her voice cracking slightly. "Sometimes I feel like I'm just existing, not living. Like the light has gone out. And I don't know how to get it back." Her words hung in the air, and I could feel the room grow quieter. It wasn't pity, but something deeper, something that felt like empathy. Every person at that table had been touched by loss, by hardship, by life's uncertainties. I could sense it in the stillness, the way they all leaned in, not to fix her, but simply to be with her in her pain. "I get it," I said, my voice soft but steady. "I really do. I've been there. I've been where you are, feeling like I didn't know who I was anymore or what I was meant to do next. But I want you to know this. You are not alone in this. And there is light here, in this moment, right in front of you. You don't have to search for it in the distance. It's in all of us." There was a pause, a moment of shared silence, before another voice chimed in. It was James, a man in his late 60s who had been a widower for over a decade. "I've found something similar," he said, his voice thick with years of wisdom. "It took me a long time to understand, but I learned that the light, the love, the peace, it doesn't just come from the good things. It comes from the hard things, too. The struggle, the pain, that's where we find each other. And that's where we find our own healing." I looked around the circle, and something shifted in me. For the first time since my return from the other side, I no longer felt separate. My experience was no longer just mine. The light, the peace, the connection, it was all there, in that circle, in every story, in every person who was brave enough to be vulnerable. We were all connected. Not in some abstract, distant way, but in the most intimate, human way possible. We were all sharing the same journey, even though our paths were different. It wasn't about what I had seen on the other side. It was about what we could create together, here and now, in this life. It was about being present, being there for each other, and realizing that we were all walking in the same light, even when we couldn't always see it clearly. The night went on, and the conversation continued, weaving in and out of laughter and tears, of stories and silence. The more we shared, the more we grew. There was a sense of unity, a feeling that we were all part of something much larger than ourselves. The light I had seen, the light I had brought back with me, was not something I had to carry alone. It was something we all carried, and when we shared it with each other, it grew brighter. As the evening wound down, and people began to say their goodbyes, I found myself standing on the porch, looking up at the stars. The world felt infinite. My heart felt full. Jack came up beside me, his arm around my shoulders, and I leaned into him, feeling the warmth of his presence. "You did something incredible tonight," he said softly. "You brought people together, Alice. You helped them see that they're not alone. That's a gift." I smiled, not out of pride, but out of deep gratitude. I didn't do anything, Jack. We did it. All of us. Together. And as I stood there, looking at the stars above, I realized something else, something even more profound. The light we seek is not something that can be given to us by others. It's something we create together. It's something we share, from one heart to another, until it spreads beyond us, lighting up the world. And in that moment, I knew that this connection, this shared journey, was the true meaning of life. It's funny how, when you've stared into the abyss, the little things in life can seem almost trivial. The noise of the world, its distractions, its daily rush, its pressures suddenly feels so distant, so small. It's like looking at the world from a great height, watching it all unfold below you, but feeling no desire to jump back into the chaos. There's something peaceful about that distance, a kind of serenity in letting go of the constant striving. But letting go isn't something that happens overnight. It's not like flipping a switch. It's more like stepping into a river, the current gently pulling you forward, and at first, you resist. You fight it because you don't know what the current will bring. But then, you relax. You let the water flow around you, and slowly, the river becomes part of you. When I returned from the other side, I thought the hardest part was facing death itself. But in truth, the hardest part was living again. It wasn't just about continuing to breathe or walking through the motions of my days. It was about figuring out how to live fully, how to embrace life after having seen the other side. It was about learning to let go not just of my fear of death, but of all the things that had once seemed so important, the judgments, the expectations, the need to control. That's what had been so freeing about my near-death experience. In that moment between life and death, there was nothing left to prove, nothing left to fear. There was only peace, only presence. And when I returned to the world, I brought that with me. But it wasn't easy. I had to unlearn everything I had been taught about fear, about success, about what life was supposed to look like. It was the last week of summer when it all came to a head. The house was quiet, the kids were off with friends, and Jack had taken the day off to go fishing. I was alone, sitting in the living room, staring at the framed pictures on the wall, the photos of vacations, of birthday parties, of moments we had captured in time. I had spent years building this life, this beautiful, comfortable life, with Jack, the kids, the house, the friends. It was good, it was safe, it was what I had wanted for so long. But as I looked at the photos, something shifted. I began to question it all. Is this enough? I thought to myself, is this truly what I'm meant to do with my time here? The question startled me. For a moment, I felt an unsettling sense of disconnection from everything I had built. It was as if I was watching my own life unfold from a distance, and for the first time, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more to it all. I had felt it when I was on the other side, the sense that life is more than just a series of routines and accomplishments. There was a deeper purpose, a deeper meaning. And I knew that I wasn't living fully in alignment with it. I stood up, pacing the room, my thoughts tumbling over each other. It wasn't that I didn't love my family or my life. I did more than anything. But I had seen something. I had touched something that felt eternal, and it didn't belong to any of the roles I had played in this world. It belonged to something much bigger, something I had to embrace, something that required me to let go of the smaller things. The things that had once seemed so important. By the time Jack came home, the decision had already been made. He found me sitting on the front porch, watching the sunset. My eyes were puffy, but there was a certain calm in my expression that he hadn't seen in a while. "Hey, you okay?" Jack asked, sitting down beside me, his voice filled with concern. I nodded, my gaze still on the horizon. "I'm more than okay. I think I've been holding on too tightly to the wrong things." He turned to me, his brow furrowing slightly. "What do you mean?" I don't know how to explain it, but when I came back, I thought I had to hold on to everything. To my life here, to the routine, to the idea of what I was supposed to be. But now, I realize that I'm still clinging to fear. Fear of change. Fear of not being enough. Fear of not doing things right. Jack stayed silent for a long moment, processing what I was saying. Then he took my hand, gently, and said, "Alice, it's okay to let go. You don't have to do everything right. You just need to be you. The person you are now." The weight of his words settled over me, and for the first time, I felt a deep release, a letting go of everything I had been holding onto. The expectations, the fears, the need for control. I could feel the tension in my shoulders start to dissolve, the tight grip I had on life loosening. "I don't know if I can live up to all that, Jack," I said softly. "I don't know how to live without fear of not measuring up." "You don't have to measure up to anything," he replied, his voice soft but firm. "You just have to live. Live for you. Live for what feels true to you now." His words hit me like a revelation. I had been afraid of not living up to some ideal, some version of myself that existed in my mind. But what if the ideal didn't matter anymore? What if the only thing that mattered was being present, being authentic, and living with the love and peace I had felt when I crossed over to the other side? That night, I made a promise to myself. I would stop chasing after what the world told me I should be. I would stop running from fear, from failure, from expectations. I would embrace the mystery, the uncertainty, the beauty of living fully in the moment. It was time to let go. The next morning, I woke up with a sense of peace I hadn't known in years. As the sunlight filtered through the curtains, I realized that I wasn't just going through the motions anymore. I wasn't afraid of what might come, and I wasn't afraid of what I had left behind. I was simply here, fully present in my life. I walked into the kitchen, where Jack was already making coffee. I leaned in to kiss him, feeling the warmth of his embrace, and I smiled. "I'm ready," I said. "Ready to live without fear. Ready to live fully." And as I said those words, I realized that I had finally stepped into the life I was always meant to live. A life that wasn't bound by fear of the unknown, but one that was open to all the possibilities the future held. The light I had seen, the peace I had felt, it was always here. It was in me. It was in everything. And all I had to do was let go, embrace it, and live. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?